You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. When we think of Carthage, we envision war elephants, merchant ships, bronze-clad soldiers, and statesmen like Hamilcar and Hannibal. But what about the women? In the grand narratives of ancient Carthage, their voices are faint, but not absent. While Carthaginian society was firmly patriarchal, Carthaginian women, especially elite women, held religious, social, and even economic roles that quietly shaped the Punic world. They are rarely named in our sources, but inscriptions, burial evidence, foreign observations, and cultural comparisons allow us to piece together a picture of their lives, one of reverence, ritual, motherhood, and immense private influence, even if they never stood at the forefront of military or political power. Carthage, like its Phoenician ancestors, held women in a religiously significant role. Temples to Tanit, the principal goddess of the Carthaginian pantheon, often featured female priests, cult attendants, and votive offerings made in the name of women. Unlike in Greek or Roman temples, where priestesses often served for a set period and were restricted to particular roles, Punic priestesses had deeper ceremonial influence, including overseeing rites, sacrifices, and seasonal festivals. Many stelae recovered from Carthaginian sanctuaries include female names, evidence that women could sponsor religious dedications or serve as intermediaries between mortals and gods. This religious agency was not merely symbolic. Religion in Carthage was political and economic. Those who controlled temples often controlled land, tribute, and community prestige. A well-positioned priestess or temple official could thus become a significant figure in elite Carthaginian society. Elite Carthaginian women were also central to family alliances and social continuity. Marriages among aristocratic families were tools of diplomacy, sealing bonds between powerful clans like the Magonids, Barcids, and other merchant dynasties. Carthaginian law likely gave husbands considerable authority over wives and children, but it also expected women to manage households, oversee education, and maintain the cult of ancestors. Archaeological finds show that women in upper-class homes were surrounded by symbols of status, ornate jewelry, imported cosmetics, mirrors, and funerary goods that suggest they were buried with reverence and wealth. These signs point to a domestic but powerful presence, women who may not have spoken in the assembly, but whose counsel shaped the men who did. Some scholars speculate that women from elite families may have influenced state policy through their husbands, sons or religious networks, much as Roman women like Livia Drusilla would later do in imperial contexts. In daily life, Carthaginian women held varying degrees of visibility. Among the working and merchant classes, women may have participated in trade, market life, or artisanal production. Inscriptions from Punic colonies like Sardinia and Sicily suggest women could be landowners or run small businesses. Punic funerary inscriptions include female names with occupational titles, hinting that in the colonial and commercial fringes of the Carthaginian world, gender roles may have been more flexible than in the capital. However, our sources are limited and filtered through hostile or distant eyes, primarily Greek and Roman writers who were often uninterested in or dismissive of Punic women. One of the most debated aspects of Carthaginian womanhood is the role women may have played in the city's controversial religious rituals, particularly child sacrifice. Ancient Greek and Roman writers like Diodorus Siculus and Tertullian alleged that Carthage practiced infanticide as an offering to gods like Baal Hammon and Tanit. At the Tophet, the city's sacred burial ground, Thousands of urns containing the cremated remains of infants and animals have been found, along with inscriptions dedicating them to the gods. Some stelae include maternal names, raising questions. Were these sacrifices made by mothers, or were their names included in grief? Modern scholarship is deeply divided on this. Some believe these were genuine sacrificial rites. Others argue the site was simply a cemetery for children who died young, and that Roman sources exaggerated the practice to vilify Carthage. Regardless of the truth, the presence of women's names at the Tophet speaks to the emotional and ceremonial role women played in family and religion, even in death. Motherhood was a sacred role in Carthaginian society tied directly to lineage, legacy, and the gods. The image of Tanit herself, arms outstretched, haloed in divine authority, was both goddess and archetype of the Carthaginian mother, protective, powerful, mysterious. Women bore not just children, but the burden of remembrance. Tomb inscriptions frequently mention women not only as mothers and wives, but as bearers of memory. In a society that did not preserve detailed female biographies, funerary monuments became the last word, a quiet declaration of dignity. Carthaginian women also played an indirect but critical role in the city's economic life. The Punic economy relied on trade, textiles, dyes, agriculture, and coastal industries, all of which had domestic components. While large-scale maritime trade was dominated by men, women likely managed household production and small-scale commerce. In colonies like Ibiza and southern Spain, Punic women seem to have had greater freedom to own property, arrange marriages, and sponsor religious sites. In this way, the women of Carthage were not invisible. They simply existed in a different social register, one where power was exercised through ritual, reproduction, and reputation rather than public office. While we lack the literary voices of Punic women, no Sappho's, Cornelius, or Aspasias survive from Carthage. We can infer their cultural footprint through the reaction of others. Greek observers, for instance, often remarked on Carthaginian women's luxurious dress and devotion to religious practice. Roman authors accused them of decadence or secrecy, accusations often reserved for women who exercised quiet influence in private spheres. It is telling that even in Carthage's last stand against Rome, we hear of mothers sacrificing their children, women encouraging their men to resist, and families dying together in the flames. Whether mythologized or real, these stories cast women not as passive victims, but as fierce keepers of Carthaginian identity. After the city's destruction in 146 BCC, most traces of Punic womanhood vanished beneath Roman colonization. The new Roman city of Carthago was refounded with Latin laws, Roman gender norms, and imperial values. Yet Tanit's symbol continued to appear in local art for centuries, subtly preserving the memory of a feminine divine. Today, in museum displays and epigraphic fragments, we glimpse the women of Carthage not as shadows, but as integral to its religious strength, cultural resilience, and familial continuity. They were priestesses, mothers, artisans, patrons, and quiet architects of a vanished world. The story of Carthage is incomplete without them, not merely as background figures, but as carriers of tradition, power, and memory in a civilization that stood for centuries against empires. Carthage may have fallen, but the legacy of its women still speaks, in stone, in silence, and in the spaces history almost forgot to remember.